Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Dudley Charlton Regional School District School Committee. It is Wednesday, March 6th at 6:30 p.m. We are at the Charlton Middle School. We're going to call the meeting to order, and we are going to move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll take a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move into our school committee workshop today. It's a little less formal. We're going to start with Superintendent LaMarche.
Madam Chair, do you mind, because it's a little less formal, do you mind if the committee invites the principals to sit around the table? So
yes.
They can be front and present? Not that they're going to overly participate or something, but it'll be nice to see them at the table, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
You guys, we've made it.
I think I counted the right number of seats.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right. I'll wait until Peter's ready.
We're talking about my dog. Bragging.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So Madam Chair and School Committee, I really appreciate the opportunity for us to have a workshop type of item on this. This is to provide a little bit more direction for us administratively and prepare us for the budget hearing. I do apologize for the posting last week and that the fact that we have two meetings back to back this Wednesday and next Wednesday, but the budget hearing it is required a number of days outside of the town meetings. So next Wednesday it does fall within the calendar for the town meetings in the timeline for budget, for FY25 budget, as required by the regional agreement. So this evening you do have the detailed budget. I did provide that electronically, but you also now have a paper copy of that. It has not changed since I provided to you electronically. What we will do is we'll create a single document for our website. The PDF version that I shared with you is not the best version of that, so I'll work on that and have that better and get that up on our website as well. But you have quite a bit of information in there that you receive on an annual basis to review. This is something that we review as well. I think a couple of important pieces in there are the Section 4, the assessment information, which we're going to cover tonight. You have district-wide numbers as well, 13 capital, 14 enrollment, and any additional information. But I think that those are critical to the work in preparation for FY25. So we'll look at the assessment sheets, and I just want to share with you as a committee that I have met with both town administrators at this point in time to go over the assessment sheets. I don't want to say that they were outright rejected, but obviously there were questions raised because they have some value to them. But I did meet with each administrator to review those. There is some complexities in the assessment sheets this year. So what I would do is I'd ask you to look at Section 4 and look at the assessment sheets that you have. And please know that Ms. Lamica is here to either catch me, kick me, or do something to correct me in the event that I say something that isn't 100% accurate regarding these assessment sheets. So the assessment sheets, what you have is you have a series of assessment sheets. You have the initial budget, which is the $2.4 million. I'm going to use round numbers this evening for the workshop. So that's the $2.4 million that was moving everything forward and including the assistant superintendent. And then you also have assessment sheets. I think the assessment sheets for the reduced budget. Is that in the binder as well or no?
It's not in the binder.
It's not in the binder. So I have to get those copies to that to you. So let's just go over the initial budget because that's the 2.4 that's moving everything forward with the assistant superintendent. So on this sheet, you've seen these sheets year over year. You have the Charlton assessment coming in with transportation. Now, transportation is a little more elevated than I presented the last time, and the reason why is, as I indicated, our assessment sheets were not ready for that that joint workshop we had with the the town leaders, and the reason why was because we were looking for E&D certification. So we did get that, and this is the information we have now. So to be clear, the transportation assessment is a little bit higher because we only have the governor's budget to go by at this point in time, and that's at an 80% reimbursement, which is a 10% swing for us. A 10% reimbursement rate swing for us is, let's say, roughly $370,000. So that obviously changed that number quite a bit, meaning we had to add at least $370,000 to the budget. So in my discussions with the town administrators, I did discuss that hopefully we can get closer to the 90, if not 90, for the fiscal year. In addition, I did have a meeting this week with Senator Fatman's office as well to build a relationship, but also to share some of our concerns. And this was one of my major concerns. I did talk about cell service in Charlton, but that's a infrastructure issue and for Charlton and for the community. But as far as for the schools, my major concern was the transportation and the volatility of changing that even by 10%. It creates what I would call fiscal havoc for us and for our communities. So I did have that discussion. It will be on their list of things to look at. I'm not alone. We're not alone as a district for that. Other regionals are faced with the same concern. This has been raised in several meetings, so hopefully that number will come down. I couldn't promise the town administrators that it will automatically come down, but I did say that, I do have a stronger sense that that number in value will come down, which will reduce the overall assessment. Now, if you look at the top part of this with Charlton, where it gets a little complicated is, if you recall, Charlton voluntarily provided a $1.5 million investment for capital purposes, which has to come out on the assessment sheet. So their total assessment may look great for FY25 at $439,000 for the fiscal year, but remember that doesn't include the base that they still have to contribute towards our budget, the $18 million, and it does include the $1.5 million that they voluntarily provided for that. So there's some work around explaining that and articulating that a little bit more. But that's, the minimum contribution, they were aware of that, they've been provided that information. Their minimum contribution has been going up because of the economic development within the community. And then if you move on to Dudley, which Dudley represents 46.7% of our budget based off of student enrollment, their minimum is $667,880. And then you have what I would call a 10% increase on transportation, which was sizable, and then additional funding as well. So they're coming in around $1.1 million before we even talk about capital. And as you recall at the last meeting, we did have a conversation regarding capital and where that falls. Capital is not part of an operating budget, so I'm not sure exactly, to add clarity to that question that was asked at the last meeting. But there is a capital expense, which we all know was coming because it was approved in September of 2022. So for both communities, you have band interest and bond, the bond for the roof projects. So this is what is estimated as the high watermark for those, because you're combining both the band interest, meaning during the project, with the bond moving forward. So we believe that number will come down as well. But that does provide Dudley, the town of Dudley, with a $351,000 bill, a $350,000 bill that we're working with them to help them, but it's really up to them on how they're going to pay for that capital assessment, which was approved by the voters, again, in September of 2022. So with that, without knowing exactly how Dudley's going to approach that, their total assessment is $1.4 million. And this is the initial budget of $2.4 million. So with that, I want to be clear. We've said that all along that we were around $2 million. So we don't, the school committee can obviously vote and decide on what FY25 budget they want. A budget with no reductions in the assistant superintendent would be these numbers exactly here at this point in time. We administratively understand that is not palatable, that is not highly recommended moving forward, that some reductions should occur to help balance the budget and work with our community. So both town administrators are aware that we are working on that, and as that was as presented, to be closer to the $1.9 million for the total increase. Now, what's going to be confusing on assessment sheets too, as I review these, is the percentage increase, because that, again, adding in that voluntary figure of $1.5 million, it changes the percentage increase. So I would tend to lean more towards how we're looking at and presenting it in general terms with our operating budget, of being the 3.6 overall, with the $1.9 million budget looking forward. So with that, for the assessment sheet for the initial budget of $2.4 million, does anyone have any questions on that assessment sheet?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, where we're saying that Charlton had put that initial 1.5 million in, are we allowed, wouldn't that carry forward so that you really, for the total assessment, shouldn't necessarily be adding this operating and the subtracting out what they've already paid, or
So
how does that work?
I'll give you my 101 that I have, and then I'm going to
Okay.
turn it over to Cammie.
Okay.
An assessment is everything in one. You can't divide assessments out. You can't, so when you look at the assessment for the community, it always involves the operating as well as the capital combined together.
Right, so I'm just sorry, like, I thought if they're deeming it to be capital, we would only take in the amount of capital for this year and then move forward the rest of it for the next year. Is that not the case?
No, from my understanding, so during fiscal '24, they provided $1.5 million, basically a down payment on the debt. During this year, they gave us the cash to do that, so we didn't have to borrow. So that, for them, that future payment going forward, the debt will be less costly to Charlton.
Right, so that's why you're seeing, Dudley's value for their ban and bond combined higher than Charlton's.
And that's why the assessment piece for '24, that number's included because they gave us that piece. So it's a budgetary piece that they gave it to us. We have to include it in the assessment numbers.
So when we say that the number's going to come down, the $271,000 for Charlton is going to come down as well. Because it's only going to be the bond moving forward, but that's why their project was actually bigger than Dudley Middle School.
Right, I guess I'm just confused on why a capital expense can be used against the operating budget.
It can't.
It's not.
It can't.
It
It's
can't.
two
It's not.
separate components of the assessment.
Okay, so the total assessment is 439,
The total is the combined of operating and capital, even though they're two separate things.
right, but I don't,
So the operating went up the $1.6 million for
Correct.
Charlton.
yeah,
And because of the 1.5 one-time payment not being there for '25, that's why it's looking like it's a $1.2 million reduction for
Right.
Charlton, which the net of the operating and the capital is looking to make it look like it's $400,000 increase only for '25.
but what would their bill be? Wouldn't their bill be 1.681?
No, The
No.
bill would be 18,777.
For fiscal
18 million.
'25.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
Yep.
okay.
So you're looking at the
So I'm
math
looking at the
behind the bill.
change behind the bill, okay,
Yep.
thank you, I'm sorry,
No,
okay.
No, great question. Again, I still think that's going to be a hard thing to explain, and Andrew and I talked about that.
Okay.
Town Administrator, Mr. Golis, and I talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
And it's true, if you look at the bottom line, rather than the change piece of it, in fiscal '24, they're paying 18,337, and in '25, they're paying 18,777. But in '24, part of that 18,337 is a one-time $1.5 million payment
right,
that they won't be making again. That's why it only looks like it's going up 400,000.
oh, okay, that makes sense
Okay.
too. And at our last meeting with our selectmen, we talked about making sure that these percentages between Charlton and Dudley were accurate, and you said we were waiting on a report, so these are accurate numbers?
These percentages are accurate.
Okay.
We did have those. What we were waiting for is the E&D certification.
Correct,
Yes.
and we got that?
We have that,
We do.
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
That is in place.
great, okay,
So because E&D is part of the formula, because we dedicate, let's say, a little over, well, not a little over, $1.1 million of E&D year over year to subsidize or to offset the operating budget. So we needed that certification.
correct, okay,
Okay?
thank you.
And
Does anybody else have any questions about this? No? Okay,
You asked mine,
okay, okay,
Okay, so my bottom line on the assessment sheets is there's more work to do. We've already, not we, I can't take credit. Cammie has already worked on a reduced to 1.9 and what that would look like. Just to give you figures as to what that would look like is for operational, for Charlton, that would be 1.3 million. And then the total after the capital being added in or worked in there, it's 139,719 instead of the 439, okay? That's for Charlton. And then for Dudley, it would be a operating increase of 869,000 total. And the capital, again, is still 351, so that would still bring it in at 1.2
And that is for what again?
for Dudley.
Let the capital for Dudley be,
A total of 338.
I'm sorry, 338.
Yep.
Okay,
That's if we had the reduced budget of 1.9 million,
okay,
Okay.
that's what I was asking, okay,
all right?
yeah.
Okay, so those assessment sheets are really, obviously critical as part of our presentation and understanding. Again, I did meet with the town administrators and reviewed them with them, which I thought, again, were great meetings, great conversations, good collaboration. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the 2.4 versus the 1.9. Again, 2.4 would be moving everything forward, including the assistant superintendent. We believe administratively that is not the best. You as a committee can obviously vote for that, but that we wouldn't recommend that. We would recommend something closer to the 1.9 million based off of our last several years of working with both of our communities. And keep in mind with the $1.9 million, there were reductions in our operating budget and in our programming that we worked on as an administrative team. It does still include the assistant superintendent, but we worked on one elementary teacher. We worked on 2 teachers at the middle school level, that is specifically to the Spanish program, and 1 teacher at Shepherd Hill Regional High School based off of course selections from the students, 3 elementary para positions that included 2 for the library paras plus 1 additional, $100,000 in technology, and also late bus is at the secondary level at a value of $100,000. But again, I'll take recommendations from the school committee, that's why we're having this workshop, if there were things that you thought you'd like to trade off. Remember, we're at the point now where it's kind of a trade. We can't just say I don't like this. We also have to come up with, well, if I don't like this, so therefore can you look at this to reduce within the budget? We're kind of at that point as well, and we will certainly do that. And then another item that we talked about, which could be an offset to help minimize any of the reductions, or add to the reductions to continue to work with the towns, which has happened year over year here as well. So again, I want to be clear, we're at 1.9 with our recommendations at this point in time, which I think is where we're going to come in strongly with the school committee next week at the budget hearing. There's another offset that you can look at, and that's fees. We've talked about fees for a number of meetings now. That's a value of let's say $69,000 or $70,000 for fees. If the committee takes action on the fees that we specifically talked about, pre-K, increasing pre-K and athletics at the middle school and high school, that could add $70,000 either to remove some of the reductions that were recommended and or add to the reductions so that we come in even lower than $1.9 million. So that's still on the table as well for school committee. And then the last item, one of the last items that I really wanted to talk about was the assistant superintendent's position. I think that still gets a lot of play, a lot of airtime, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because I know it's easy to say that, well, maybe we don't need it, but I just have to continue to advocate for it as a superintendent. But I know that that's probably getting old because I'm the superintendent asking for an assistant superintendent, and it sounds conflicting in some ways for me to continue to do that. So I just want to touch upon it again. Looking at the job description that I worked on before I even started actually here in Dudley Charlton, and it was refined, but I wanted to go back to the original one. We were very clear that the assistant superintendent, and I always like for learning and teaching, because I always like learning before teaching is an identified position, because I know you need them both hand in hand, but the whole priority is student learning. Learning and teaching is responsible for ensuring that successful implementation of district and school improvement plans to fulfill the district's vision, mission, and objectives. The Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Teaching is charged with providing a clear focus on student learning and achievement while overseeing all elements of Dudley Charlton Regional School District instructional programs from early childhood through grade 12 and post-secondary learning. It's an incredible position. That's a lot of work. That's a full-time gig. Integral to the role of the Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Teaching is oversight of the vertical progression of instructional programs, which we've talked about that several times at our meetings, the horizontal and vertical programming that we have in our district, bringing our sister schools together and making sure that we're on the same page and our students are receiving the same high expectations of teaching and learning at their grade level and in their school. To create consistency with growth within overall educational experience of each maturing student attending the Dudley Charlton Regional School District. The Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Teaching assists with budget development and expenditures for all instruction-related programs, a huge priority for us. Provides leadership of district functions related to instruction and accountability for student performance, including but not limited to curriculum development and evolution, instructional leadership, professional development, learning assessment, and the establishment of continuous instructional improvement driven by outcomes. That is a mouthful, but that's just really the introduction to the position. And I wanted to just talk a little bit more about it. One of the things that I think is conceptually lost in the reduction of the assistant superintendent is Dudley Charlton for decades now, not a couple of years, for decades has always had a director or a leadership position for this role in the central office. So this is the first year going without that over the past couple of decades. And if the expectation is that we're going to move forward as a district and continuously improve, that's going to be very difficult without this role. Because Dudley Charlton has always had it, and I've been here for 4.5 years now, and I've heard over and over again, why aren't we recognized as good as we were 10 years ago? Why aren't we doing as well as we did 10 years ago? That's been a common theme here. I know, obviously, the pandemic wreaked havoc with a lot of our progress, but it compounded the work that we have to do instructionally for our students and ensuring that we are providing a high-quality instructional program for our students. And the assistant superintendent, whether you want to call it that or call it something else, that role has brought in over $1 million worth of high-quality instructional materials for us as a district on a grant. And thankfully, you as a school committee supported a stipend for a person to continue those grants over $1 million so that we don't continue to lose that momentum. But there's so much more to the role than those grants. And we piecemealed something together this year, and we'll survive the year. But I don't want survival to be complacency. I don't want survival to be that, well, it's okay then. We did okay. We made it through a school year. Because we're asking, as I've said in several meetings, working at Dudley Charlton it's a requirement to go above and beyond. Well, this is exceeding above and beyond in so many ways. But how do you take a position that you've had for decades now and eliminate it and then roll all those responsibilities that somebody either developed over 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 12 years into other people? It's almost impossible to do that. That person was doing more than, just filling out a grant. That person was a resource. That person was a phone call. That position really had an eye on continuous improvement for us. That person really provided a lot of direction instructionally for us as a district. Yes, I am the instructional leader as the superintendent, and I take pride in that. But you really need one person whose sole focus is on the instruction within our district, and that's really what that role is. Never mind other complexities of that role, and that's, as I've heard since I've been here for 4.5 years, parity was a big concern for our schools, our sister schools. There wasn't parity in our buildings. There's more parity now than there was when I started, I can tell you that now. And that's the credit to the principals, but it's also credit to the leadership of that role. There are other things, EL is, as you know, because we had a TFM, and last year during the budget process, there was some frustrations abound because we had to add an additional EL teacher because we were found by program monitoring that we were not meeting the needs of our EL students. That falls under the assistant superintendent as well. We don't have that point person at this point in time. We don't. Civil rights. We've talked about it at this table. Yes, right now I am still the civil rights officer, and Chair Kamignani identified and knows that that's really not right. That's really not the system that's designed for, and our attorneys have said that as well. But it's patchwork. It's for us to put together. Homeschool program. We have over 80 students that are in homeschool programs. That requires oversight. Title I. Title I is another program that we've had piecemeal in pieces to. We're still, again, we're going to survive this year, but survival shouldn't be complacency. But we really need an investment. If we're really looking at instruction, this role needs to look at Title I and instruction at the same time and how it's all interwoven and how it all comes together. It's critical to continuous improvement for our district. Professional development. Professional development needs to be tied to everything. How many districts have we all worked in where we've heard, well, it's a flavor of the month, we're going to move on, but that's where Dudley Charlton's going because we won't have that continuity of oversight for parity and everything else in high quality instructional materials to ensure that professional development is all aligned. We're going to do the best we can, but are we crossing our T's and dotting our I's? Are we doing the best for our students? Are we doing the best for our communities around professional development? So far, yes. So far, yes. But some of these things will start slipping through the cracks if we continue without that role. Educator evaluation. You want to talk about, we negotiated a contract 2 years ago around educator evaluation, revamp the evaluation system with our association. That takes oversight. Principals have oversight, but it takes somebody in the district office to have oversight with it as well and look for patterns and trends and how to support it, how to support professional development, how to support what instructional resources do we need. That is part of that role as well. Orientation and mentor program. And then the last, I have other things listed, but grants. Grants. This person really is our grant person, our grant go-to person, our grant contact, oversees our title grants. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. I feel like it's not falling on deaf ears because you understand this, and it's hard to articulate this because it sounds like as a superintendent, I'm just looking for an assistant, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody to lead these categories for the Dudley Charlton Regional School District. And the last thing I want to say about this role, too, is that we're going to survive this year, and one of the reasons we're going to survive this year is because we have phenomenal teachers. We've never had an issue with our overwhelming majority of our teachers in our district doing the right thing and providing the best education they can for our students. But as you know, as we all know, they are desperate for leadership. They are desperate for a champion around what they're doing. Because what we'll get to is some of what we had when I first started here is we'll have pockets and islands of good things happening, but the continuity will be very difficult to bring together. And so we really need this leadership to pull all of that stuff together, to have oversight, accountability, and really be the champion. You know, we're going to come in with a student achievement report, which I appreciate our acting assistant superintendent / Dudley Elementary School principal for putting together, but that's really a critical role of the assistant superintendent as well. If you ask me to do it, I'll do it as well. I will do it. I'm not saying that I'm not going to do any of these things, but it won't be what I think it should be. And I will have to give something else up to make that what it is close to what I think it should be as well. So going back to, we have incredible teachers, but they're I don't want to say they're desperate, but everybody needs somebody to point them in the right direction and support them and provide them the right resources and things that they need. It really avails their voice to the direction the district goes in. And that's what that person needs to do. Principals do a phenomenal job of it with their staff. But the day-to-day things, which is so hard for me to explain here, day-to-day operations of a superintendent or assistant superintendent or principal or any other administrator can be very complicated and very time-consuming. But the leadership in this area is something that is really needed for Dudley Charlton Regional School District. And again, you've had it for over decades. You've had it for decades in that office. So if it's the title that's throwing people off, then I am sorry, but that's lame. But the title's what's throwing people off, because the role has been there for decades.
Two roles.
At one time we had 2 roles. Mm-hmm. For years we had 2 roles. So to work with our communities and to work with you as a committee, we've had with Ms. Alamica coming on board, we've really been pushing the envelope on grants and things of that nature moving forward. If there's ways for us to try to fund some of the assistant superintendent, we're going to try to find a way to do that, to try to help make that work. But that's temporary. We're moving from temporary to temporary, but that position is so critical to us that we may need to give up a couple of things around PD or something of that nature with a Title IV grant or something of that nature to try to help fund this position, because the role and the leadership is more critical in a year's time than the PD or the total value of the PD in that year's time. and then we look to try to put it in the operating, fully fund it in the operating budget in the following year. That's what happened when there were two directors. That's what happened with one of the directors. One of the directors was originally funded through some other revenue, and then it was rolled into the operating budget. So we would look for that. But I just really am pleading with you as a committee to not let this go by for the future of Dudley Charlton and for the students and teaching and learning in the Dudley Charlton. Will we continue to move forward and give the best we've got? Yes, that's what this district does. That's what our staff does. But I just think for the long view, for the future of Dudley Charlton, the momentum we already have with high-quality instructional materials in our district, the momentum in moving that we're doing, I just think this position is critical, and I hate to see it not be part of this FY25 budget. So, with that said, I turn it over to you as the committee to provide direction. I know the reductions, again, just to go back over the reductions, and we'll take feedback on that, and the fees, again, we should be prepared for, you know, how are we going to address those? The fees could offer $70,000 in reductions or offsets for the reductions that were listed. We have 4 educators, teachers. We have 3 paraprofessional educators. So that's a total of 7 positions to get to the $1.9 million. That is, while some of that is obviously painful, it's painful year over year. That's consistent with the past couple of years that we've been trying to establish a budget. Technology, we know that we have technology needs. We're going to try to look for ways to support technology. In the late buses, we will have more information for late buses, as we talked about before, in the ridership on late buses. I can tell you, like in between seasons right now, I can tell you, because sometimes I go out for a dismissal, there's very few people staying after school, you know, during these times. So, but we'll have more information on that. But I do turn it over to you as a committee to try to prepare us for the budget hearing for next week. And I will have an updated PowerPoint presentation with the assessment sheets in it as well. Okay?
So what information would be good for the committee to hear, or that you might need? I will start and say, I think it would be very important for the public to see that assistant superintendent position description on the website, as well as the superintendent's description. Because I think it's, you know, if they truly can see the differences between the two, maybe they wouldn't, you know, it's not a secretary for you.
No.
No, you know, and I think that people need to understand that.
Great.
I had asked Superintendent LaMarche for the numbers on the buses, so I don't know if anyone else had asked that.
I have.
You did too, okay. I'd like us to look to, since no one else is talking, I'd like us to look to it thinking about, you know, based on the numbers of the buses, would it be possible to do 3 days a week? Or like, how could we structure it so that, you know, I think sometimes it can be an equity issue for some of our students, and the more we can provide that equity, the more we should.
So reduce, not eliminate. If that can be.
Possibilities.
Yes. Yep, nope.
Right, like at least just know the cost.
Or maybe like on like the in-between times of sessions for sports, when it typically gets most used, then that in-between time, maybe that's the time we consider maybe not having it.
Yep.
You know, if you only have 5 kids, maybe.
Like you run 2 sessions of buses too, right?
Is the 3:30, the 5:30 from the Hill, and then there's the, is it like what's the middle school one?
No, the times that we run the buses. The late buses.
It's 3:30 from the middle school, isn't it? And then the high school is 3:30
Right.
and 5:30.
But we run a 5:30 bus from the high school, right?
Yep.
You know, what would be the impact of getting rid of the 5:30 bus? Monetarily would be good to know.
Okay.
Could you at least keep the 3, or push it out to like 4, which I think sometimes it is, I don't know. Here or there. What other?
looking at ridership, we should maybe look at the number of students that are currently enrolled in Spanish, since that's the course that we're looking to eliminate.
Okay.
And I know you mentioned there was a course being eliminated at the high school due to lowered interest.
It depends on course selections.
Oh, so that would be determined
Yes.
after they,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought there was one already that has had low interest.
No, it's a rolling evaluation.
I think I would also like to know, if you're going to take those kids out of Spanish, where are they going? And what's the impact of that?
Well, so I think it's common knowledge that here at Charlton Middle School, we have not been able to find a Spanish teacher, number one.
Yeah.
So even if we keep it, we're probably heading down that road again because it seems to be on our reduction list year over year.
Correct.
But it's also a very difficult position to fill, even if you have a permanent role in there as well. So those students right now are either I think some seventh grade students may have had options to go back to exploratory, but our eighth grade students are in a directed study at this point in time.
Okay. And if we looked at providing options such as, Edmentum or different online course software programs?
We've explored everything, and the best would increase our budget.
Would increase. Okay.
And you